Well, there's Kentucky Derby week, there's Preakness week, there's Belmont week, there's Super Bowl week, Masters, all that good stuff. And then there's the Breeders' Cup. We've got Breeders' Cup week action here. We're just a few days out recording this from Friday and Saturday, the Breeders' Cup World Championships. Not only is it my normal colleague, co-host, friend, Bailey Armour, but we've got our colleague as well, Jeremy Plonk, joining us to talk about the mile. We'll get to that in the Classic up next on Horse Sense.
Welcome back to another episode of Horse Sense, a highly anticipated one, if I say so myself. Of course, as always, I'm Bailey Armour, joined alongside our friendly neighborhood horse handicapper, Scott Shapiro, diving into some Breeders' Cup races this week as we're finally here on the Wednesday of Breeders' Cup week. Today, filming this lovely episode, going to dive into the Breeders' Cup Classic and the Breeders' Cup Mile with some help from our friend Jeremy Plonk, who will be joining us shortly in the next segment. But before we get to that, like I mentioned last week, and if you didn't catch last week's episode, our major Breeders' Cup promotion this weekend here at Xpressbet and FirstBet is a $20,000 exactathon out at Delmar. So the way that works, if you hit 6 or more exactas on Breeders' Cup Friday or Breeders' Cup Saturday, each of those days is a separate $10,000 exactathon. You hit 6 or more exactas at Delmar on the card, and you're going to win your share of $7,500 in bonus cash. And then the player who hits the most exactas overall on the card wins their share of an extra $2,500 in bonus cash. So a ton up for grabs there, and definitely some big prices with some of these shippers heading in for the exactas. So hopefully you'll make some money baseline in the exactas and then playing in that promotion as well.
Yeah, I was recording something with Daily Racing Form, and we were talking about the difference in prices for the Breeders' Cup and the normal day in North America. So all the pools are you get massive payouts for what you're saying. Not only is it outsiders coming in, but just bigger fields, more depth to them. So should be a challenging one. I've got an article up on the First Bet and Xpressbet blogs already on the Friday edition, and I'll have one out on Saturday. In terms of tournaments, last chance. So we're recording this on Wednesday. So if you're watching it before Thursday afternoon, you have one more chance at that point to try to get into the BCBC. $1,000 up, a $1,000 qualifier. Last chance to get in there without paying the big money. And then more importantly, you want to play at Xpressbet or FirstBet. Xpressbet though really is the only place. You really want to play at Xpressbet though. We have all the tournament players know Xpressbet is the place to play tournaments. And then
That's right.
Of course, you're going to play the BCBC on there. You're comfortable with it. Stay at home. I understand wanting to go out there, but if you're staying at home, get set up on Xpressbet. And then excited for my Spaces on Saturday. Last one on the road up to the Breeders' Cup. Thanks to Jason Allen for that nifty graphic. But we will have a Spaces at 9 a.m. like normal. I'll have Doug Knockman, who's out in California, wouldn't say professional bettor. He has a real living as well, but he bets very seriously and regularly. He'll be on with me, as well as Travis Stone, voice of the Kentucky Derby and Churchill Downs, and the Virginia Derby, voice of the Virginia Derby this year. So looking forward to having the voice of the Virginia Derby on this week's Spaces. Well, we've got a first here on Horse Sense 2.0, a special guest to the program. He's special to us, but even more special to you. We get to see him and talk to him a lot. He is the host of the It's Official and the First Call podcast. I get to join him on Fridays nowadays to preview the stakes races. On this week, it'll be Thursday, which is just tomorrow. We're recording this on Wednesday. But Jeremy Plonk, I'll stop talking at Horse Player now. Good to have you on Horse Sense.
Yeah, it's good to catch you guys in a different format instead of typing messages on Slack all day. So it's kind of nice.
Yeah, we keep the Zoom cameras off during those morning meetings. Nobody wants to see us at 9:30 in the morning. So this is a refreshing change of pace.
Yeah, nobody wants to see me while I'm typing those mean Slack messages to Jeremy either. I'm usually lying down. Anyhow, good to have you aboard. And we brought you on for this race particularly because The races that I am least confident in overall, in races that I have to put time into and talk about a lot during the year in many cases, are the Breeders' Cup races with a lot of Europeans, and the mile is one of those races. This is a very competitive race. I know a lot of these horses, but I know that you follow things better over there, and you get a real head start the way you handicap these races. So I know you're excited about this one because you got some prices. Bailey, I know, as maybe a little less creative, but it's some common opinions as
Oh,
well.
hush. Leave me alone.
But let's talk about the pacing here because it's murky to many, including me, Jeremy. You look at it, and even when you click on the the daily racing form, time form US pace projector, it doesn't give you any information because there's so many unknowns when it comes to the Europeans that it doesn't have any confidence. So how do you see this? When I look at it from my perspective, I don't see a lot of speed, but do any of the Europeans or foreigners have speed to heat this up, or do you see it similar?
No, I think that's where the speed probably comes from in this particular spot. The horse on the far outside, Key Rat, is a horse who I think has a chance to upset because he might be the speed of the speed in here. In the Sussex Stakes, he was a rabbit in there at 150 to 1, and he just kind of went on with it, and nobody told him he was supposed to set the table when he went wire to wire that day. I think an outside draw is an interesting deal for a European because they get to be the last to load. They're not standing in the gate where we usually see a lot of, nonsense with the international horses, and kind of gets the walking start out of the gate. And if, look, the outside post might scare you, but if he's going to break, that's when he's going to run and win, right? He's not going to win from behind. So if he gets hung out on the first turn, he wasn't winning anyway. So if he breaks, I think he's kind of really interesting in there. The Line in Winter has a little bit of speed. The Aiden O'Brien runner in there, he could be sent up from a more inside post. He's from the 4-hole. The other speed horse might come from the U.S. Formidable Man has been kind of close to the pace. You got Southern California speed, if you will, there. And of course, he's 6 for 6 over the turf course at Del Mar. So one of those three probably sets the tempo in there. But the only one who seems like they've wanted to in the past is Key Rat. And I kind of think that's where it's going to end up.
Good information without watching those races. Good point too. 150 to 1. Henry Matisse, who finished third in there, where the race he won by a neck, won a Breeders' Cup race last year. It was one of the juvenile races. Obviously the juvenile colts because he wasn't able to run in the juvenile fillies. So good 20 to 1 on Key Rat, and if he gets out of the gate well, he could be loose and lonely on the lead. Bailey, I know you looked at obviously the race shape, but and the competitors as well, and interesting thoughts there for Jeremy. I'm not sure if it changes how you look at this race, but it does probably go through the number 2 notable speech, the 5-2 morning line favorite in here, regardless of how you see the pace. Are you a fan of this horse, or what do you think of notable speech and maybe some of the others? I think you're on mute.
Was that a JP question or a me question? I know I'm very excited about this horse. Personally, for me, no, I mean, I know that this race has historically been one that the Euros have obviously dominated, and we've seen some more price horses in this one specifically, but I just keep coming back to a notable speech. We've talked about him earlier on Horse Sense this year. I mean, Charlie Appleby and William Buick know this race like the back of their hand. I think he's had a perfect training setup coming into this one. Of course, has already, been in this race here before. And I'm not finding a lot of cons when it comes to notable speech, other than wishing that we would get a better price on him.
Yeah, I mean, do you have any concern about the fact that he kind of gets out of the gate slow and that he's gonna, the way we're talking, me and Jeremy are looking at it, either not a lot of pace or someone loose on the lead, that he's going to have to run down at a much bigger price?
Yeah, I know. I think JP's probably right about that outside Key Rat horse setting this pace up here. I wish that he wasn't so close to the inside. In a perfect world, I wish he was like in the 5 or 6 post here. I think that would be almost maybe not necessarily single territory for me, just because I get a little nervous, but I would be like 99% confident if he was a little more towards the center of the pack here. So hoping that he can put that light bulb on when he comes out of the gate. But I mean, he's going to have to stand for quite a while from the 2 there.
Yeah, he doesn't get out of the gate well. I think that, he's going to
almost never.
Is there anybody else? I know you said would have singled. Well, we won't argue about whether the 2-hole is better or equal or whatever the 6-hole is turf race. But save that for another day. But is there anybody who you're not singling? So who else do you have interest in? We'll talk about how we're gonna, you're gonna bet it after we get some of Jeremy's thoughts. But just curious, it sounds like there's somebody else you have interest in.
Yeah, that's why I'm so grateful to have these two genius minds bookended on our podcast today. Also intrigued by the number 11 rhetorical for William Walden coming up into this race off of a pretty good streak. Might be a little step up in class for him. Maybe you guys can kind of assuage my fears on that one, but I think he's been improving. I haven't yet been able to catch him on the Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup show. I've been tuning into that during the mornings, but somehow his training pattern and my wake up alarm time just don't seem to be quite lining up. So I'm going to have to scour the internet and see if I can find some footage there to see how he's adapted. But I mean, I know that Keeneland race has provided some winners for this race historically. Yeah. So that would be the one that I'm kind of looking at using alongside of Notable Speech.
Yeah, he's got tactical speed too. He seems to be able to get out of the gate. And Irad Ortiz, who's riding better than anybody I watch, this year. And that's no surprise, obviously. Be mindful of the pace. JP, not to take away from the horses that she likes, but I think Rhetorical's 5-1 going to be drawn outside, and Notable Speech. What do you have a knock on Notable Speech?
Well, he hasn't finished with really big late pace figures. He's in the 90s, and for a horse who's a big closer, the 2 races he ran in the U.S. last year in the Breeders' Cup Mile, when he finished 3rd, the winner More Than Looks was behind him at the head of the lane and ran past him, and he never got the Johannes. So my question, and say he only got a mid-90s last time in that late pace figure at Woodbine when he ran down the Canadian bred horse there for Cassie.
Yes, yeah.
He may not be as sharp a finisher as it looks on video. That's my one thing with him is, so if that's the case, I fully expect him. He's running really well right now. I think he comes up to the race beautifully. I think he's going to run his best race. But if he kind of just runs 2nd or 3rd, it wouldn't shock me, because somebody else might be able to just kick a little bit more. And that's kind of what happened to him last year. So at a short price, that's why I'm kind of like looking, well, if you're going to beat him, you'll probably be in front of him at some point and he won't catch you. Will another horse outkick him from the back? There could be some possibilities of that, but like the real strong closers in this race don't do a lot for me either. So, I'm kind of looking at, maybe the race gets stolen up front, or, there's a Japanese horse in here, Argine, that I'm interested in. We'll talk about him when you want to get to that one.
But let's talk about him before we get into.
Now sounds great.
Yeah, let's talk about this Japanese Lord
Mare
Club Mare, who takes on the boys here, first time in the States, right? And we'll talk a little about her, get your thoughts, and then we'll talk a little wagers.
There's one thing I really like about international horses when they come to the U.S., whether it's at the Keeneland meet or just anywhere, or Breeders' Cup Day, is when they pair with a jockey who's domestic. And Frankie Dettori is about as domestic as an international jockey can possibly be at this point in his career. They know American paces. They know the tightness of the turf course. They know, and Frankie rode Southern California last year, full time pretty much. I like international horses teaming with domestic jockeys. I think that's the perfect combination of that international turn of foot and class and turf breeding and experience with getting an extra length or two, right? A jockey's definitely worth a length or two in every race to me. And so if that's enough to get Argine over the top, I think that's a good spot. Now, she hasn't run internationally yet, but 2 starts back in the Victoria Mile, one of the bigger races in Japan. The mare who beat her in there won the Saudi Sprint on Saudi Cup Day. So she's got international experience. She only got beat a half length. And then that same mare this summer went to France for the Prix Jacques Marois, which is the top international race for milers in all of Europe. It's certainly of France, and got beat 3 lengths against the boys in there. So there's a little bit of that Japanese barometer, if you will, going international and doing pretty well through that winner of the Victoria Mile. And she only got beat a half length. Argine got beat a half length in that race to the Victoria Mile winner, who has done pretty decently internationally. So I think she's very interesting. And here's the one thing, and I mentioned in my video for the Breeders' Cup Wager Guide. The trainer in here, and let me see, I'm going to go and actually look at my notes again, so I make sure I get the pronunciation remotely close in here on Argine. But the trainer's name's Mitsumasa Nakachita. This trainer, I didn't know much about him, so I started my research when the pre-entries came out, and you're like going through everything. the former assistant in the U.S. to Bobby Frankel. I mean, this is a guy who's
Oh,
never run a horse in the Breeders' Cup before, but obviously a veteran trainer. He's the top trainer on the circuit there in the JRA, like year round. This is interesting because Bobby Frankel was the greatest trainer probably in the last 30, 40 years, 50 years in turf races and with fillies and mares. And when you put those two together, you wonder if he learned anything under Frankel. He obviously knows what it takes to win races here in the U.S., being a former assistant to Frankel. I think it's interesting, and I think that's a cool connection. And the fact that he went and got Frankie Dettori also tells me, somebody understands American racing, not going with a Japanese jockey, not going with an international jockey. But again, a guy like Frankie, obviously he's Italian and we know he's an international rider, but he's been Americanized here over the last, 5 years or so for sure. I think it's interesting. I think it's a great combination. Argine is one I'm really excited about. So Argine and Kirat, the rabbit from the outside from Europe, those are the two bombers that I'm kind of like looking at. If we can beat Notable Speech in here, a lot of respect for Johannes and Formidable Man, the two Californians. I think they're going to run their races and be, in contention as well. But I'm going for a couple bombs.
All right. Well, before we talk wager, one quick question, real quick. Art, are you worried about her? I don't know what kind of running style she has. Do you have any thoughts of how far she's going to be off this potentially modest pace? Or
yeah, I've watched her videos. She's got a really nice turn of foot, and she usually launches from mid-pack in Japan. So, she's not going to be up to the front, I wouldn't think. But Frankie kind of understands the racing form too, and he knows running lines. He might try to keep her a little closer if it's possible. I mean, this race could walk, right? And so horses that are normally 8 lengths off the lead might be 3 in this race because I don't think it's that fast. Of course, every time you think that, something else changes. But I don't know where it comes from amongst the domestic horses in terms of the speed. I just don't see any of them other than Formidable Man, maybe, turning on the rocket early and trying to get out towards the front. So I don't think she's going to be super far out of it. And I think Frank could be smart enough not to get too far back. And he'll sense the pace, where I don't think the European jockeys have a good sense of pace when they come to ride in America. They're not used to feeling what 46 looks like on the front versus 47 or 48. They're usually just trying to find cover and then come kick, So I think Frankie will have a good sense of the pace, and that's going to help her if she's good enough. We don't know if she's good enough, obviously. And all we have is that one international running line horse to kind of give us a little bit of feel and sense for. But the Frankel angle with her kind of gets me a little interested.
Yeah, Formidable Man is the one that I am hopeful will get the aggressive ride. Johnny B's doing everything right. I think we'll get overlooked to an extent in the wagering, come into the race well. But let's talk wagers from 2 different perspectives with 2 different styles of handicapping the race. Obviously, Bailey, let's talk about yours because this is kind of a it's the Breeders' Cup, the World Championships. We've built up to this over the course of several months. And do you? How are you going to attack this? I mean, it sounds to me like you're on the favorite and you have the logical in there as your alternative. How are you thinking about attacking the race?
Yeah, I'm going to work on, sticking to what I know, which is, of course, exactas, like we've talked about like a million times, and playing in that exactathon. So I'm going to play the Notable Speech over rhetorical exacta. I'm going to play it both ways, but I'm going to heavily weight it towards Notable Speech over rhetorical, which is the lesson that I have learned from you doing this podcast over the last, year and a half or so, or how many times we've done it. Tip your cap to that one. Me, a couple of years ago.
I have, but it wasn't.
Probably
he'll also want a 20% cut of anything you win. You know that, right?
Yeah, he's gonna take some off the top there. So I gotta pay the piper with that one. But honestly, now I think I am fully convinced on Argine, and we'll place a side win bet on that horse now after JP's argument. I've been sucked into it, and I'm convinced I've heard enough.
Why not combine it with your wagers? I mean, you just think, why not maybe play 2 with 9-11 and then maybe the 9 to win, or look, if you're going to be my advice on Breeders' Cup Day, and then I'll allow JP to chime in and then give how he's planning to bet the race a few days out with his long. You have chances to bet, shorter price horses year round. You can make solid cases for horses that are prices. Don't build your wagers needing. I'm not saying to just toss favorites to do it, but I think you want to build your wagers where possible around horses that can make your day in that race, because that's what's going to end up making a difference, JP, I mean, I don't know if you think you just take what you give you on Breeders' Day or if you approach it differently. Obviously, with this race, you're going to be approaching it very easily, because when you have prices like you have, it's not that difficult to figure out ways to potentially make money off them.
Yeah, I mean, there's good and bad betting fundamentals, and when you have horses you like at prices, you should always get win money on them for sure. I mean, that's kind of a good fundamental for 363 days a year. But the 2 days it might not be would be Kentucky Derby and Breeders' Cup, because the pools are just so big in the exotics that we don't get the field sizes are larger here than they are in most big races. We don't get many grade ones with a field of 13 like this Breeders' Cup mile, and with a vulnerable favorite. So even though I do like price horses, I'm still going to go so heavy in the exotics in here. I'm still trying to hit the tri super, even if the winner pays $46, I mean, because then I'm going to try to hit something that's going to make the season, not the week or the month. But if we can get a tri or a super here with one of these 20-to-1s on top, we can make our season that way. And you don't get many opportunities to do that around the calendar. So you got to kind of take advantage of those. Will you pass up and say, well, geez, I only had 10% of my budget on the race in the win end, and on most days it would have been 80 on the win end on a horse like that? Yeah, but you know what? I can kind of pass up a $40 payout in search of a $4,000 or $40,000 payout. So I'm kind of willing to do that and swing a little bit more on Breeders' Cup Day, even though it's not most fundamentally sound thing to do 365 days a year, obviously. But the other thing too with me in here, the fact I do like 220-to-1 shots, and I do kind of like them equally, which doesn't happen that often, obviously. Keyrat's 20-to-1 in the morning line, Argine's 20-to-1 in the morning line. Like them for different reasons. But if I bet both of them to win, I basically made them 10-to-1 shots, right? Because half my money's out the door. They both can't win, so I've got guaranteed losing money out the one side. So I've kind of screwed my value a little bit by liking two long shots on top. So to me, I'm going to key him on top in the exotics, and obviously the multi-race bets, I'm going to be by two in this race. And if I'm right on one of the two, now I'm looking at, getting something across the pick 3, pick 4, pick 5, that could just be, major box cars. And so that's the way I'm going to approach it. If I just liked one of them to win, I would definitely get a bigger share of the win money on them. But in this case, I'm going to use them both on top, and I'm going to spread with several horses underneath, like the ones you mentioned, Notable Speech, Johannes, Formidable Man. They're all horses that are in my mix underneath. And also, I think Solon, the other horse from Europe, is a horse that you probably want to look at for in thirds and fourths, for sure, as part of that gimmick. Rhetorical is part of my underneath mix. I mean, I'll just read them off to you. I mean, I've got 13-9 on top, but 2, 7, 3, 8, and 11 are the horses that I'm going to be working underneath in the second, third, fourth spots and try to knock it out. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but really, I mean, a trifecta where you take those two on top with the six horses is a $30 play or a $60 play for a buck, $30 for 50 cents. So, if you're into the 50-cent tries for $30, you got a couple 20-to-1 shots on top, and then, some logical horses under it and some other prices to mix in with them. You might be pulling out a really nice trifecta on a $30 ticket.
Good stuff there. That's why we had him on for building tickets with the mile, the man behind the Wager Guide, which is a big project this time of year. He and Nate behind the scenes taking care of that, but definitely worth downloading and checking out. Most of you that have watched this program and, of course, know about the It's Official and First Call podcast probably know about the Wager Guide as well. But Jeremy Plonk at Horse Player Now, my friend, I will both be talking to you quite a lot, so I'm not going to say I'll see you soon. But to the audience, we thank you for joining us, man.
I appreciate it. I'm glad you asked me about the mile, because I still got about 8 races I need to hammer down. So we've got time, but it's closing in on us. Good luck to everybody.
You too.
Well, Bailey, we've had 2 episodes of Horse Sense, both Breeders' Cup driven, and we haven't gotten to the big one, the Classic. It's a good thing we didn't record it last week. We would have had to make a few changes, one pretty major. As we found out this morning, we found out yesterday that Sovereignty had spiked a fever, and we all kind of figured it was probably going to lead to him scratching out of the race. And this morning, being Wednesday morning, we got that news. Takes some of the starch out of the race. To me, it opens it up, but I know you were a big fan of that horse.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say just how disappointed I am that we won't get to see him compete against older horses like I know myself and a lot of other people had been looking forward to, not just looking forward to him competing, but hopefully, playing him as well with some of these prices. I think some people, maybe weren't as sure about his chances against older horses after we saw Fierceness put away journalism in the Pacific Classic. Last out for those two. But I was very gung-ho on Sovereignty. So very crushing disappointment to wake up to this morning to see that we won't get to see him on Saturday. But I think that definitely opens up the race a lot more, which leads us into kind of a pivotal new segment here for us. This one we're calling What Would Scott Do? As you just saw in between segments there. Thanking JP for those mile insights, and then coming into the Classic here. This is one that I look at being able to take advantage of all of your years of expertise in handicapping and kind of picking only in a good way, all of your knowledge here when it comes to races like this. I mean, you've seen races like this shape up and shake out before with some favorites, with some other prices, these international shippers. But now with the not defection of Sovereignty, but with the scratch of Sovereignty, I mean, how do you think that's going to affect some of the prices on maybe like the likes of Sierra Leone and Forever Young?
Well, first off, I can report the revised morning line for those who have not seen it, or from David Aragona, the odds maker for the Breeders' Cup. With Sovereignty out, Fierceness is the 5-2 morning line favorite. You've got Forever Young and Sierra Leone as the co-7-2 second choices. You've got Journalism at 5-1, and you've got Mind Frame at 6-1. So those are all of the logicals in here. So in terms of the betting, I'd be very surprised now if Fierceness or Forever Young. I'm sensing a lot of Forever Young love. I'm sensing Forever Young will be the second choice in this race, maybe significantly, with Sierra Leone being the third choice. Maybe the public's money will have some meaning here. I know the computers will wash a lot of it out, but still, on a big day like this, maybe Sierra Leone public money will have a say. But with kind of a murky, somewhat pace, I don't think it's going to be like last year, at least, even with the Rabbit. I think Fierce is going to be the favorite in here, and I think Forever Young is going to take plenty of support.
Now with the scratch of Sovereignty, I mean, you have still more closers in this field than you do early and pace horses. So I'm sure that the Rabbit, contrary thinking, like you mentioned, will really set that up for him. What are your thoughts on Antiquarian in this one? I feel like I haven't heard a lot of people talk about him, maybe besides you, and I would like to know why you like him so much. JP convinced me on Argene, so you might be able to sway me on Antiquarian here.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, it's not. I like being the only one on a horse at times, especially if they're going to be a price.
That's the whole point of their mutual wagering, is it not? You always want to be.
Here's the way I see this race, even with a Rabbit. When contrary thinking caused all the super chaotic pace in the Whitney and Sierra Leone won, there was other legit speed horses that needed the lead or really wanted the lead in that race. Something Gold was a New York bred that always had been on the lead, and then you had the horse that Phileas Fogg, who was always right up on the lead. So those horses broke in front of the Rabbit, and they were like, "Okay, I'm going to go. The Rabbit's not here," and then the Rabbit came. So I think it really created a crazy pace last time, and I think this is key and why I like Antiquarian is. One, he showed that he could. Those races are run differently. The Rabbit races, you've got to know, they're fast paces, but it's not as if it's contentious paces where they totally fall apart every time. A lot of times, it's a second or third horse that times the ride right and gets to jump on the closers, and that's kind of what Antiquarian did last time. And I like the fact, well, one, he's going to get to move in one post. The 1.25 miles at Delmar, I'm not worried about the outside a little bit. You have the full length of the stretch. They break out of a spot they only do a couple of times, and it's just like the whole straightaway. And I like that he beat that field, and I think he's one of the few horses in this race, Bailey, that is coming into it, I think, in the best form of his career. I could poke holes at, I'm looking at some of these horses. Fierceness, he might run the best race of his life, but I don't think he's going to. We've seen some really big races from him, and he's, I don't know why he's going to run the best race of his career. Maybe he will. Forever Young, I'm worried about him running the best race of his career. That Saudi Cup would take take the life out of anybody. I'm
Oh
wondering,
yeah.
that was an incredible race. Sierra Leone needs everything his way, and Mind Frame to me is a big question mark with no form coming in. So I think I got the horse that comes in. I think I'm going to get the best race from him if he takes to the track. I know he's going to get the distance, and I know he's going to get a pretty good trip. I don't know. To me, this was a race of sovereignty, and a lot of everybody else. You take sovereignty out, I'm not going to swallow chalk.
No, I think, yeah. This is how I can tell that you've had such an influence on my handicapping thinking now when I start to think like you when it comes to race shape without having talked to you before the race.
Blame you for bank account.
No, I mean, I definitely see your points on antiquarian. I think I'm still stuck to Sierra Leone. Am I 100% confident that he can repeat last year's performance? No. Am I ever 100% confident in that horse? No. But moving from 8-1 down to, did you say 7-2 was the revised morning line that Aragona's put out now? I looked at it. 7-2. Okay, yeah. Moving from 8-1 to 7-2, I mean, maybe makes me a little more in his favor. I don't think that we're going to see the chaos. I hope that we won't see the chaos this time like we did last time. And he's my overall pick in the grid for the wager guide, like you mentioned. Do what?
He needs the chaos.
It couldn't hurt him. I mean, that's for sure. What about Baeza? I don't think I've heard anyone talk about Baeza here. Would you include him in your super?
Oh, yeah. I think it could go a number of ways for him. I think the problem with him is we really haven't seen him finish ahead of many great horses, to say the least. He's kind of run close to really good horses, great horses, to the wire, but he hasn't beaten. The Pennsylvania Derby was a solid field, nowhere near this. But he's definitely a horse that you could make the case very strongly that still has his best races ahead of him based on the fact of his progression. Whereas I think journalism, is going to be half his price. I think we've seen what journalism is. Maybe the extra time off a little bit will help. Maybe if he was going to run as a 4-year-old, I would feel different. A long time off to mature, but I wouldn't have any knock anyone playing Baeza at any level of this race because he's just moving forward. So I could make a case that he can win this race because I think you can argue his best race is still ahead of him.
No, yeah. I don't know. I don't think that I would play him above probably third choice in this one, but that just could be me. I mean, this is the whole point of talking to you about these kind of things, is that we get your take on things. I will say about journalism, though, you said, training well into this one. I saw him on the Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup stream this morning. They played a replay of his training. He walked out of the gate, looked very professional, very calm. And then as soon as the rider asked him to pick up the gallop, just kind of very smoothly, almost like really, really fluid over the track in the way that he was training this morning. He didn't look rushed. He didn't look like, remember how Burnham Square was so cranked up the week before the Derby and he was like really sweaty and always trains hard like that? I feel like journalism never really goes like that. He just always looks like everything is kind of no big deal to him. He's a very business-like horse. And I think mentally he's a little bit like an older horse to me, in my opinion. So I'm including him in my top 4. Of course, you can see those in the wager guide, but anything, last but certainly not least, anything that I could be missing here in this race, any horse that I'm like grossly overlooking in your opinion?
Now, the ones to me without sovereignty in here are Antiquarian, Forever Young, and Fierceness would be the ones that I want to use in the top. And I'm going to use Baeza the more I talk myself into him here because he's going to be such a big price. But it was good chatting about it, right? Breeders' Cup Classic, even without sovereignty, it's going to be a damn good race.
Yeah, amen to that. Even without sovereignty, maybe you'll be right and an Antiquarian will take it home. As always, thank you so much for watching another episode of Horse Sense. Maybe a long episode of Horse Sense there, but an incredible shout out to our guest of honor this week, Jeremy Plonk at Horse Player Now, for his expertise in talking through the Breeders' Cup Mile with us, building some tickets. And he's definitely creative with some of those trifecta opinions. So please feel free to tail those, because I know I will, and I'm definitely convinced on the Japanese shipper Argine in there. And then, of course, Scott and I rounding things out in the Breeders' Cup Classic. His overall pick, Antiquarian. He just really loves that horse every time we've talked, and I am stuck like glue on Sierra Leone. Please let us know in the comments who your picks are in any or all of these Breeders' Cup races. We're all ears, and I'm always down to pick some winners with you folks, and make sure that you opt into that $20,000 Breeders' Cup Exactathon only on Xpressbet and FirstBet. Good luck this Breeders' Cup weekend.